Alright guys, the day has finally come. Finally got my schedule to meet up with the owner's schedule, and today we're going to do brakes. So today we have new master cylinder, we have new wheel cylinders and new hoses, and also new brake fluid. So hopefully by the end of today, maybe, fingers crossed, if we can get the brakes bled, we'll be able to drive it out of the garage. At least around the block, because the cooling system's not that great. So, first thing, let's get it jacked up, put it on jack stands, and get the wheels off and see what's behind those wheels. As you can see, Croyle, that's what I'm using for the lug nuts. I've had too many stuck lug nuts in the past, so this will make it just go just a little bit easier. See what's behind wheel number one. Alright, we got all four wheels off, but before we start on the brakes, I just kind of want to show you underneath the car. It's super straight and super solid. I mean, it's obviously dirty, but all there too. Here's your main basic drum brakes right there. So, wheel cylinder, springs, brake shoes, and then this is your brake drum. And they actually look pretty good. Just what I'd hope they'd look. So, look good enough we can just sand it down and replace these. I don't have to, but I think he wants to. That's a good idea. Always is. Alright, so I got the brake line disconnected and the old wheel cylinder. Now this wheel cylinder really doesn't look too bad. It probably would still work, but it's always best to replace with new, if you have new, if you can get new. But on this Chevy you can. But that was interesting, it says made in USA on the top, and I guarantee you what I put in is not going to be made in USA, sadly. But you look at the brake shoes look okay. I think they'll sand down, and then the brake drum looks good too. This is the front driver's side, so I'm going to go ahead and throw this side together, and then we'll go look at the passenger side and see what we got. So step one for disassembling these brakes is obviously take off the drum. Once you get the drum off, you can use a tool like this. It's a brake spring tool. In order to get these brake springs off, it's very difficult to do it any other way, so I wholeheartedly recommend doing it this way. Kind of use the other arm of the tool as a lever. And sometimes it don't pop off first time. That's okay. There we go. Okay. Take this little piece off. that aside. Gonna pull apart your brake shoes. And then this is actually one big bolt that holds in the wheel cylinder, so that needs to be taken off. But if you look, there's a crush washer right along this edge, and that needs to be beat back a little bit before you can actually get a socket on it. I'll learn that the hard way on the other side. Alright, once that's done, you need a 1-inch diameter socket in order to fit over that. And I already soaked it with penetrating oil, but I highly recommend you do that, and then also use a breaker bar on the end of your socket or end of your wrench, just because I don't think it's going to come off any other way. These are usually on there fairly tight. They're usually 60 foot-pound. Alright, finally got it off. I couldn't do it with either my arms or my legs and the breaker bar, so what I ended up doing is using the floor jack on the end of the wrench to finally pop it loose. So there's a tip for you. If you can't get something like this and you have room to put a floor jack under it, do it, because it will help. So this part comes off. So there's the crush washer. There's this. That's what holds the wheel cylinder on. And from there, these little deals on the end you're going to need for your new ones. You guys see that they're wet, which means this one was leaking. So that needs to come out. Now, we need to move on to this soft line. The best thing to do is to keep this attached here, and then come up here and work on this one up here. Get the flashlight. Alright, so what you don't want to do is you don't want to round off the ends of this, so you have to use a flared pipe wrench. You see that? Yep. So, one thing you can do is you can put a pair of vice grips on your soft line. That way, when you rotate the hard line, this won't spin with it and it'll come apart easier. Like always, use a lot of penetrating oil. Okay, so that's loose, so that's good. Alright, next you get the this little clip on that holds the hard line to the frame, or holds the soft line, excuse me, to the frame. There's that little clip. This little clip on the brake line that needs to come off. And that should be loose enough to come out. And then if you look down here, what that does is it takes this whole assembly out. There's that. So now we can put a new one. Alright, so since we're not replacing the brake shoes or brake drums, we're just going to do a little quickie sanding on them. Now when you look for this, you look for scoring in it, you look for lifting between the media and the shoe, but these look really good. They'll clean up fine. There's really no need to replace them. That's not the kind of restoration this guy wants anyway, so we're just going to sand them down. I'm using 220. brush them up a little bit. Then you also do the same for the drum. So I won't record that because you know what it looks like. Alright, when you put the new line into the new wheel cylinder, always make sure that you have this little brass crush washer in there, or else it will leak. So unscrew that on before we put it on the car. Torque that to 60 foot-pounds. I'll do that later, but I'm going to go ahead and do the line and put in these little dealios. Said before, it's best to make sure this is nice and clean and able to spin. That way you don't cross-thread it. You don't want to cross-thread these, because if you do, you're totally screwed. So make sure it spins by hand fairly easy first. Make sure the threads are all clean. Then put in your new hose. Also make sure this is a nice curve up. Make sure it's not twisted or in any kind of weird fashion. We don't want any of that. Alright, then to put the springs back on, make sure you put on this little plate right there. And you hit the springs on using the same tool you used to take them off. This part's a little more violent. Just like that. If you've never done drum brakes, this is a very foreign thing, but it's not too bad. Boom! Just like that. And then next, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe off all this old grease on the spindle and check it. Make sure there's no score marks or wear. Sad part is on the Cadillac there's quite a bit, on at least one of them. Also, what I like to see is that the fact that they're all not Chinese. These are BCA bearings, so good bearing to have. Usually not made in China. But nowadays, everything's made in China, so sometimes you can't get away from it. But this is the grease that I'm using. There it is. For the wheel bearings. So the way I see it on these, the more the better. I mean, you just can't It's almost impossible to put too much. I know bearings don't ever go bad because you have too much grease on them. So first is going to be this. Make sure you're on there straight. That goes right on there. Grease all that out.